Well, here's a weird question. Beth in Minnesota, I think it is. How are you? What's your question for Dave?
Yeah, I am. So I grew up in Detroit, and I went to a Catholic school for 12 years. I knew kind of back then that there were some priests and possibly some nuns that were homosexual. And the older I get, I'm kind of thinking that that's where they were shipped off, if you will, because, growing up in the olden days, did gay exist? Oh, we'll just send our kids to the seminary and then they can live there, because if they have sex with other people and they're not procreating, it doesn't really count as sex. And I was wondering why back then they were protected. Well, let's just say this. There was a priest at my school, and he had an alcohol problem, or they guised it as an alcohol problem. And what I'm thinking is that he would drink, black out, abuse the kids, and then claim that he didn't do it because he was in an altered state, and, blacked out and did it while he was drunk. And, they, instead of doing anything about it, they just moved them to another parish. And it wasn't until, 20 years later that it kind of caught up to him, not from my school, but from another school. And nothing ever happened to him, except maybe he did community service and he was asked to no longer be a priest. And I feel like there's this long-standing, I don't know if I can use the word perversion or something, but I feel like they're protected, and I don't know what it is or why by the law.
Yeah, I can't speak to the law, and I wasn't a Catholic priest, but I'm aware of the systematic molestation of children by thousands of priests and the systematic cover-up by that church. How anyone could remain not only Catholic, but I'll just leave it at that, given that sad state of affairs, it is beyond me. So that's my first comment. The other piece to that is, and possibly part of the problem is why are priests not allowed to marry? The argument, as I understand it, traces it back to Jesus, who was allegedly never married, which is not in the New Testament. You can't find any evidence for that. But the other tint to that is that sex is somehow bad and something to be avoided. And it's just a very unnatural and unhealthy view of sexuality. I'm not saying that's the reason for the problem of the pedophile priests. The larger problem to me is the systematic cover-up that the Catholic Church engaged in by moving these priests that you're talking about. And I've heard some stories. I have had friends tell me stories over the years of abuse that they were aware of. And it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible, and it's sad, and it's disgusting. And, personally, I feel like I want to get a hold of his number and call him up, and without accusing him, just talk to him about, the effects that it can have on the, not only on the little boy's sexuality. It will affect his relationships if he doesn't deal with it and shoves it down into his emotions and never deals with it. Then his children will deal with it. It becomes an ancestral problem. And what I don't like is the statute of limitations that they have on it, because, but 10 years later, by the time the kid's 21, I'm thinking, he's not even a full adult at 21. He's still probably in shock by it. And it probably won't take until midlife crisis, maybe at that point, when he finally realizes, like, oh, fuck, I got to do something about this. And it may or may not even surface. So it's just,
So one of the things is that I think a lot of what Dave's pointing to and complaining about actually comes from Paul, because Paul was very, very down on marriage. Paul was down on women, and not in the good way. But this whole thing of, I want to make sure that we're very careful. It's not just the Catholic Church. It is Protestant churches as well, as we're finding out as more and more investigations are done. It's just the Catholics were far better at hiding and shuffling them around and not putting forward, not holding the criminals responsible for their action. And it's not just young boys, it's young girls. It has a massive impact on a bunch of people. It has nothing to do, by the way, with whether you're heterosexual or homosexual. It is a power thing. It is these individuals, when there's a Bible verse about God giving you over to a reprobate mind, and I would argue that what's happening with ministers who are abusing that position of power in order to sexually assault children is as close to a reprobate mind as you're likely to find within the church. And the fact that the churches, Catholic and Protestant, continue to make excuses for it and hide these people so that they don't have to face consequences for their crimes. I'm in agreement with Dave. I don't know how anybody can still be Catholic at all, but I also don't know how anybody could defend any church that's doing this sort of thing. Everybody was up in arms the other day because the Pope's social media liked some hottie in a short skirt, when the Pope isn't even really in charge of his social media. Somebody in the Vatican who normally tweets for the Pope forgot which account they were on and liked a gorgeous person, and everybody's like, oh, look what the Pope's liking. I wish the Pope had liked that. Matter of fact, I'd applaud him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. On that note, we're not going to have a better answer for you, Beth. On that, I want to get to a couple other callers, but thanks so much for calling in.